Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave, and this week it's the Acteurist Spotlight, part 3 of Delphine Seyrig. Sadly, the last part for now. I'm sure we'll return to plenty of other Seyrig efforts in the future. I know we've got one on Marienbad coming out later this year. Today, though, it's Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai du Commerce, 1080 Bruxelles. That's all one movie title. And Golden Eighties. There's no Fear and Movie going this week. We've been lying low in the frigid temperatures in Toronto. Leonard Maltin, in his 1991 TV Movies and Video Guide, saw fit to ignore both of these Seyrig Chantal Akerman joints. Thankfully, we've got Letterboxd to give us a little summary. Here's how they describe Jeanne Dielman.
Oh my.
A lonely young widow lives with her son following an immutable order. While the boy is in school, she cares for their apartment, does chores, and receives clients in the afternoon.
No indication of what these clients are.
For that, you have to watch.
And is she, in fact, lonely?
That's a question that we'll explore, I'm sure. The director is Chantal Akerman. Cast list, I think we'll just leave it at 2 people, Delphine Seyrig and Yann Decourte, playing Sylvain. There are some other people who appear in the movie.
Quite a few others. Shop owners. That woman who takes her seat in the cafe is pretty important.
And there's the voice of Chantal Akerman as the neighbor.
Oh, really? Very good delivery. I didn't know that.
So this is, by acclamation, the greatest film of all time.
Woohoo!
And we've now seen it for the 4th time.
In our journey with it, we both actually felt the same way about this one. A rare example of a well-known cinephile movie that neither of us had ever watched by the time we met each other. We were resisting it because we felt it would be like taking medicine, that this was a movie that had some kind of strident feminist message, and other than that, it was formally interesting as an experiment, and we weren't really interested in either of those things, message films or formal experiments.
Michael Snow type nonsense.
Well, she did love Michael Snow.
I'm glad she took it in her own direction.
She said she thought his films were very sensual.
Okay. As you pointed out, there are some holes in that little summary that we read. She is in fact a stay-at-home mom and a sex worker.
Yes, one of the things that makes this an odd film about the oppression of the housewife is that there is no husband.
No, he died several years ago. Doesn't seem to have been a particularly tyrannical man either. We don't get a very strong impression of this guy.
The main thing she says about him is that
he wasn't that ugly.
He wasn't that ugly. That was the line I was thinking of. Unlike what my sisters thought, he wasn't that ugly.
It's not like she endured horrific conjugal tortures and is shell-shocked from that. Not in any traditional melodramatic sense, anyway.
No, but as Akerman said, she has internalized these things, so she doesn't need a man.
No, exactly.
Hovering over her, making her do this stuff. Of course, as everyone who comments on the film now says, well, it's a commentary on the role of the husband, sex as an exchange for money. But that's not all there is to that either, because the problem is she doesn't not enjoy the sex. That's what the problem is for her.
Yeah, I remember we have talked about this before.
Oh, we have. Every time we watch the movie, we go a little deeper into it. I don't think on the first viewing we even knew what happened really at the end. We were pretty shocked to discover. Partly this shock, I think, was because of our impression of how the movie had been received as a kind of straightforward feminist message film.
Well, that's not entirely true either. It's just the picture that we got.
Obviously not. Now the discourse on the film is very rich and talking about all of its ambiguities and contradictions and tensions. And of course I found material going back to the time already saying that. Certainly Chantal Akerman herself was saying that at the time, and Delphine Seyrig. This is not a message movie. This is not a movie somehow championing women, although it is, as Akerman herself admitted, it's at least probably presenting a new kind of fantasy about women, a fantasy about women by a woman.
Right.
But what Akerman wanted to bring attention to, and this is when the movie started opening up for us, I remember. She wanted to bring attention to kind of the lost and undervalued gestures of these women. So right there's ambivalence, there's tension. On the other hand, this woman's compulsiveness is a marker of oppression, but on the other hand, because these activities are so deeply associated with women and with the women that Akerman grew up with, she loves the gestures, right? These are beloved memories that haunt her. But then there's another layer of ambivalence within that, because in Saute ma ville, Akerman's first film, a short, she repeats these gestures, but as an anarchic rejection of them, right? So even more than its formal innovation, this is what does make the movie a masterpiece, right? The fact that these memories that are so politically loaded are haunting the filmmaker, but she has such violently mixed feelings about them. And don't we all? That's the thing. When I watch this movie, I particularly think of my grandmother at the Thanksgiving dinner table or the Christmas dinner table. Everyone's saying, sit down, sit down, sit down, because she'd be cooking and she'd be serving and then she'd be washing. We'd keep telling her, sit down, sit down, sit down, just sit down and rest. And she didn't want to sit down and rest. That was the thing. She couldn't do it and she didn't want to do it for more than 5 minutes.
These routines, these obsessions had a purpose, a structuring function in the person's life. As you get to know Chantal Akerman, and of course we went to see that retrospective at TIFF in 2019. It was quite an amazing experience. 20 movies?
Right.
And we've read a fair bit on her since then. I've listened to quite a few radio programs on France Culture, including interviews with Chantal Akerman. And the more you delve into that, the more you realize she is, of course, concerned with gender and the ways in which patriarchy may have contributed to structuring women's lives throughout the 20th century and before that and beyond it as well. But behind all of that, there's something even more horrific, one of her primal concerns, which is that the world is a hell. Primary piece of evidence for that, whenever she'll talk to an interviewer, let's say, and it comes into a lot of her movies, is the Holocaust.
Right. Oh, well, that's going to be very important in Golden 80s, of course.
But I think it's important in Jeanne Dielman, too, just a sense of the cosmology of the person that made this film. It's very clear, the more you watch this movie, this routine is all that's keeping her alive. It's the only thing that's keeping her going. She doesn't see it as oppressive. What's oppressive is if any single thing throws her off. This movie chooses to show us that process of her being thrown off. Another thing that we have to talk about, and we have to really think about, is what the film is saying. Is it saying this was inevitable? She was going to unravel and commit a murder? Or is it all a horrific contingency that things played out this way? And in my mind, it's the latter. We're just watching the perfect storm that caused her to lose control of her life forever.
But what is the perfect storm? The perfect storm is starting to have orgasms. We have to grapple with this question of this jouissance. Why is that the thing that threatens to undo her world? I think the answer is inherent in the way I'm asking the question. It's the thing that threatens to undo her world because it would undo all of her oppression and then leave her without this facade and these rituals.
Really interesting, but I don't see in the film definitive statement, at least, that this is the first orgasm that she's had. She may have been having them every afternoon.
Okay.
We don't see any of the other sex scenes.
Well, but that's part of how to interpret the film, right? How to interpret the text, because we don't see the first sex scene, but we know how long it takes. It takes as long as it takes to boil the potatoes.
Yeah, the second one is the problem.
Yeah, that's where the orgasm happens.
Right, okay. Because it just goes on way too long.
Yeah, because she's enjoying herself, and then her whole routine is fucked, so to speak.
Yeah, so the key day is not the day of the murder, it's the day before.
Yeah, that's when things start to go wrong, part of the way through the day. Although I was wondering whether it was intentional or not, that after she does the veal cutlets, she leaves a few traces of flour on the table. It took me this many viewings to notice that. And this is a movie that, it's interesting, doing this Seyrig Spotlight and focusing on most of the movies that are considered her auteur collaboration masterpieces. We left out last year Marienbad. That used to be, before the BFI selection, Seyrig's most famous art movie. And we left out one of her auteurs that we weren't familiar with, Ulrich Ottinger, who's currently making a vampire movie starring Isabelle Huppert. Ottinger is in her 80s. In any case, it's just interesting thinking about the relationship between these great movies and how they end up constituting Seyrig's screen legacy. Thinking about the relationship between Jeanne Dielman and Muriel for me on these viewings as part of this series, and how both of these are films that are just, and India Song too. They're all films part of their modernism or postmodernism, so full of detail in their various different ways, and so uninterested in clearly communicating all of that detail. You're just going to notice more and more and more and get more and more and more story and more and more mystery on every viewing. That's what I'm trying to say. So after multiple viewings, I start getting as obsessed with the housework as Jeanne is.
And as Sylvain is.
Right. And you're like, you just start picking up the obsessive compulsiveness by proxy, and you're just like, oh, you missed that. Oh, you missed that. Oh, you gotta get that. What are you doing? What are you doing? What's happening? You know. Well, Sylvain's reactions when he's telling her she missed a button.
T'es tout décoiffé is the first one. When he comes home and she hasn't had time to straighten her hair because she's been fighting this battle with the potatoes.
Well, she's also been in an erotic daydream, which the messy hair strongly signifies. And then the next morning it's her button.
Yeah.
She misses a button on the fuzzy housecoat. What this reminds me of is an insight that I came to about my relationship with my mother as an adult, looking back. My mother worked, very dedicated to her career as a nurse. She worked part-time so that she had time to raise her children as well. And my grandmother also worked, and Chantal Akerman's mother worked. It's just something she's not dealing with, because she's dealing with another aspect of her relationship to that female legacy and that image here. She does deal with it in Golden Eighties, though. My mother worked, but still, any woman, I'm sure to this day, I have no doubt, looking at my friends, looking at relatives, female relatives who are my peers, I have no doubt that every woman to this day who participates in marriage and the raising of children, okay, not every woman, but maybe every woman, gets caught in the Jeanne Dielman, what do I want to call it?
Vortex.
Vortex? Matrix? I don't know. And starts enacting these gestures in relation to housekeeping, in relation to child care. And so, like Akerman, I violently, and I actually don't have any children, as Akerman did not, I violently rejected all of this. Later in my life, when my mother started having midlife crises, breakdowns, started rejecting this role herself, and suddenly she wasn't, trying to figure out how to make the perfect thing for dinner. She was much better at that than Jeanne Dielman. I don't know how she found time between raising kids and working as a nurse to go through magazines and go through cookbooks and find something new for us to eat, periodically. I don't know. Because I surely would have complained if she hadn't. But anyway, when she stopped doing all of those things that I myself had contempt for and had refused to do and kind of belittled her for, it was like the order in my world also collapsed, right? And suddenly there was no structure, and there was just free-floating anxiety.
She was Christ or Atlas taking on the burden of structure so that you could be free.
I guess.
But again, this movie posits that taking on that burden can be the salvation of a person, and letting go of that burden can be a prelude to letting go of life itself.
Well, actually, when you put it that way, there is an obvious relationship to Golden Eighties.
We'll put a pin in that until we get to the second half of the discussion.
Thinking about the relationship of the movie to sex made me think about it in relation to another movie we watched recently for the podcast, which was Black Narcissus. Retroactively, Akerman came to think of the ritual aspect to Jeanne Dielman's housework because she was basing this on her mother and her aunts.
Les tantes.
She came to think of it as a substitution for the Jewish rituals that they stopped engaging with after the war. Maybe, but you don't need that to arrive. Although, yeah, the background of the Holocaust certainly helps give weight to this compulsive structure, as you were saying, Dave. But you don't need it to be a replacement for Jewish ritual, specifically. I was thinking about it, in terms of our discussion of Black Narcissus, where there we saw this dangerous, all-consuming, identity-threatening sexuality, which is identical with the void, and the Protestant work ethic that the nuns try to use to control it. And like Jeanne Dielman, of course, they fail.
And one thing that kept coming up in interviews interviews with Akerman that I was listening to over the past few days. Clearly she made many statements about this film, but what she kept coming back to is that this woman gets a little bit too much time to think about the universe, and it drives her insane. She just can't face it. The rituals are what shield her from that oppressive understanding of the horror of the world. And the more I watch this movie, the more akin these rituals start to feel to the accountant in Heart of Darkness, who is continuing to live the way he always lived in a British accounting house in the middle of a tropical jungle, because otherwise he'll go insane.
Well, that obviously relates to Black Narcissus.
Yeah.
And to India Song. And, that's something else I was thinking about on this viewing, because we watched it in juxtaposition with India Song. How the screams of that baby on the third day, no matter how many times I watch the movie, like the screams of the Visconsul, never become less harrowing. And it's really the only time in both movies anybody shows strong emotion. Even when she's murdering the man, she doesn't show any emotion.
No, she really sleepwalks into that one.
But yeah, I mean, I think, that is a way that I have to understand why sexual pleasure is such a threat to her, because to have a relationship with her own sexuality, to discover her own identity in that way, which I'm sure really was of substantial importance, unconsciously or consciously, or both, to a lesbian filmmaker, to have that relationship with her sexuality would be to blow up her world, to blow up her life. And she can't allow that to happen, therefore, because it would be the denial, the obliteration of this artificial reality created by the rituals of the patriarchal oppression.
I think we have to interrogate this a lot more. Where did you come across the statement that this was her first orgasm?
Oh, all over. Whenever Akerman talks about the movie, she's always bringing it up.
That this was her first orgasm on day 2.
No, what she's never said this was her first orgasm ever in her life. I haven't encountered her. I don't recall her saying that. Just that is what makes the difference in day 2, that she has this orgasm. And then everything collapses.
But why would it happen? Because there's got to be something else.
Oh, you're asking what moves the mover?
Well, these are the kinds of questions I think you have to get into, right? Because she's just seeing the same guys every day. She makes veal once a week. She makes meatloaf once a week. She sees each guy on a regular rotation. So why all of a sudden would this one encounter with him make such a difference, right? She's been seeing these same guys over and over and over again.
Is it her sister's letter? Because that comes up on day 3 when she's talking, to the woman about when she goes on her obsessive mission to get this one button fixed. She's suddenly waxing nostalgic about her sister's visit, and she has this trouble, this block about writing her sister back, right?
And she doesn't know what to say about whether they can go to Canada or not.
Yeah, but she becomes unusually talkative, talking to this first woman about this button on day 3.
That's why I'm saying it's overdetermined and contingent, the way that the whole movie plays out.
So there's the sister's letter, so that's different, something different in their lives.
And
right?
Also a present from her sister, which is absolutely key because she's trying to unwrap the present, and that's why the scissors are there for her to use them at the end.
And the sister is talking in the letter about how
she should get married.
She should get married.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and Sylvain is asking her questions as well about sex and about whether she needs to remarry.
Right, and he questions her about the letter. It's the letter that prompts him to say, well, my aunt said it was a miracle when she married her husband, right? And that's when they get into this whole conversation. And he says, if I were a woman, I could never make love to a man if I didn't love him. And she says, well, you're not a woman, so how would you know?
That's right. And she ends that whole conversation by saying, well, you needn't have worried about any of this.
They're fighting. Akerman and Seyrig, or Seyrig just all by herself, is fighting in this documentary I saw as a Criterion extra. Autour? But I guess it's playing on autour.
I don't think so.
Autour?
Autour de Jeanne Dielman just means spending time around Jeanne Dielman.
Yeah, but it sounds exactly the same when I try to pronounce it, so it's probably playing on autour. Yeah, so this documentary made at the time of the making of the movie, they're fighting because Seyrig wants to know something about this character rather than just blindly enacting like a puppet the gestures that Akerman wants her to enact. And Akerman's really, really not forthcoming at first. She'll talk about why she's interested in these gestures and her obsession. Like, they both talk to her aunt about exactly how did did you prepare the veal cutlets, right? Trying to recreate all of this. Akerman keeps saying, well, okay, I'll tell you a little bit. I'll try to think about what I mean. I don't want you to psychologize. Just don't psychologize. But all of the psychology of Jeanne Dielman, it's not in the performance necessarily because Akerman didn't want it there, but it is in the writing.
The scenes with the neighbor, voiced by Akerman, and especially the little monologue that we get, to me this time it was even more clear than ever. My thesis about this film is that it is a meditation on cosmic horror and dramatization of the worst possible chain of contingencies when someone who's developed a successful strategy for survival is thrown out of her rhythm. The upshot of that whole conversation where the neighbor says, I wound up at the butcher's, I didn't know what to get, I made like the worst possible decision, just at random, and now I'm stuck at home with all kinds of veal that nobody wants. There's a flattening effect there, which is brilliant and all the more powerful for it, where that little mishap that ruined everyone's dinner is not so far off from the worst possible decision that Jeanne Dielman makes at the end of the movie. Oh, there are scissors here and there's a guy here. I'm just gonna put the scissors in this guy. And then she wanders off zombie-like with blood all over her.
Well, Akerman also often talked about how she thought it had the structure of a Greek tragedy. But like the most banal, mundane Greek tragedy ever. But every single thing that happens, I think you're right. I wasn't thinking about it this way, but now that you... Unconsciously, I guess I was, because I know what you're talking about. And every single thing that happens contributes to throwing her off just that little bit more, and then just that little bit more in a cumulative effect.
If the scissors weren't there, that guy doesn't die. And then their life is not so different from what it had been for days and weeks and months and years before. She would have gotten back on track eventually if this worst case scenario hadn't played out.
It's an impulse, and she is having this sexual experience that is
disturbing,
pleasurable and frightening and alienating and horrifying all at the same time. And there's all of these things that she doesn't know how to deal with.
Akerman made the movie, and if she's saying that there's something so different about that second day's sexual encounter other than the fact that it just took too long and the potatoes got overcooked.
No, it's an orgasm.
I have to assume there had been other orgasms before. Maybe she resented them as well or felt very ambivalent about them.
But everything is timed. That's what I'm saying, right? So she knows how long it takes to fuck one of these guys, which is the same amount of time it takes to cook the potatoes, right? And so if she's lingering, if she's having some kind of pleasure, that's going to throw the whole timetable off.
Yeah.
I know you want the movie to not be as sex negative as it is, but it's not. That's what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to kind of theorize why this orgasm is so terrifying. And I really think it is about what it means for a woman against all odds, or any person against all odds, to come to terms with themselves as a sexual being with their own desire, and how fundamental that can be to identity.
Yeah, there's no question that's got to be part of the mix.
And this woman doesn't love anybody. That's the other thing. This is what comes out in this conversation on day one with her son, that the aunt loves somebody. And I mean, this has got to be part of what's so disturbing about this letter to her. The aunt has a family. The aunt loves her husband, right?
Her Canadian kids, skiing and skating and dealing with vicious winters.
And Jeanne has, as far as we know, never loved anybody, certainly not her husband.
I feel like she does love Sylvain, and that first day when Sylvain comes home, she really lights up.
But they can't speak to each other.
No.
At all. What do you think of that? The ritual between them at the dinner table. I was thinking about this a lot this time. The ritual of the reading, where every time they have dinner together, he starts to read his novel at the table, and then very calmly, after about 5, I bet you could count the actual amount, about 5 spoonfuls of soup, she says, no reading at the table, and he puts it down face down, and then they don't speak, and he stares into space when she's getting the rest of the courses, or when she's cleaning up, or he looks at his glass, and there's like figures on the glass, right, in gold leaf, gold decorations. Is he so bored that he's like making up a story about the figures on the glass?
Well, that's a kid that's desperately in need of a cereal box. box or cracker box or something to read.
Right.
I mean, that's what I did when I was forbidden to read. On weekends at my dad's, everything was very strict and you could not read at the table. On weekdays at my mom's, you could do whatever you wanted.
But the question is, what's going to happen if he defies her? She doesn't seem like the kind of person, like, what would happen? Would all hell break loose? Would she scream at him? Would she beat him? Like, what? Why does he...
Seems very unlikely.
Yeah, but why does he always automatically obey her?
Because he understands how important the ritual is. He's a very perceptive kid. I really like this performance, too. As we've already remarked, he notices when her hair's a little out of place. He remarks on the button. He says, you don't want the radio tonight? What's going on? And then again, he says, we're a little behind schedule. We don't have to go to a movie or wherever we're going.
That's like the story that I told about my mother, too. The rituals, he doesn't initiate the rituals, but he's part of them, and the rituals are also important for him. His mother has to run like clockwork, like an automaton, or his whole life is going to be thrown out of kilter.
Right, so it's reassuring to him to be told to stop reading at the table, and that's why he does it. It gives her a chance to enact that part of herself, which is crucial. It's like when she notices something that's out of place, she fixes it. Well, what he's doing is out of place.
And some of the things, when you're watching, spending all of this time during this movie just watching her do these mundane things, washing the dishes, preparing the very bland, boring dinners, making her coffee, that really gets out of control on day 3, making the coffee.
Well, because something's wrong with it, and she can't figure out what.
Is there something wrong with it, or is her mind is she just losing her mind?
That's what I'm saying, yeah. Everything is out of kilter, and it just doesn't taste right, and she's experimenting with each component of the coffee. It's an amazing gambit, right? She tests the milk and you're like, oh, is she going to find out the milk has gone off? No, it's not that. Can't be the sugar, and it's not even the coffee. So there's no intrinsic property of today's coffee that's wrong. It's just that her taste buds are not reacting the way they're supposed to.
But when things are going right, then watching her do these things is actually very soothing. I want to call it Zen, because Zen Buddhism is shorthand, pop culture term for this kind of absorption in what you're doing.
Yeah, intentionality.
Yeah, to the point of not thinking at all, right? In that documentary again, at a certain point, when she's doing the veal cutlets, I think it is, Seyrig is asking Akerman, well, what is she thinking about? What's she thinking about? Is she thinking about her son? Is she thinking about her sister? Is she thinking about what she has to do? Akerman's like, I think she's thinking about the veal cutlets.
Exactly, that's how it comes across. And that is a mark of a very healthy mind, right? A mind that has found a way to exist in this world.
But this is not a healthy mind.
Well, I think it is, as long as she is on track.
But to be that dependent on these obsessive compulsive behaviors can't be a healthy mind.
Well, she's self-medicating, for sure, but we all do that, right? When I watch that, I do feel somewhat envious because I can't do that, right? Like, if I have to do the dishes, I have to be listening to a podcast. I can't just eat. I have to read the cereal box at the very least.
How many times did I, watching her do these tasks in silence, I kept thinking, wouldn't a normal woman, have the radio on, have a soap opera on?
Exactly.
Be daydreaming. That's what we think about when we think about a classic housewife of the 50s or whatever.
Yeah, it's the foundation of radio and television programming during the day, that women are not just going to be fully absorbed in their tasks. They want distraction from them. But that's not how Chantal Akerman envisions this, because it's not really about studying the typical North American or European housewife in her habitus. It's so much more philosophical than that.
Yeah, and this isn't a typical housewife.
No, not at all.
Maybe the sister is, but not Jeanne Dielman.
Oh yeah, the sister, I'm sure she is watching soap operas while she's mending the socks or whatever she's doing. And that's what I would do. That's what all of us would do, except Jeanne Dielman.
Oh sure, I remember my grandparents at night. My grandmother would be doing her knitting, and she'd be restless leg rocking in her rocking chair while the knitting needles are going crazy. And then my grandfather was in his recliner having his cigarette, and they'd both be chattering while they were watching the TV, right? And every time a thought goes through my head while I'm trying to read or write something, something or even watch something on my computer, I have to hit the new browser window and type it in and look it up.
Jeanne Dielman doesn't have to do any of that, and in that sense, she is far ahead of most of us. But it comes with perils, because everything does need to go exactly right.
Watching the movie this time, I was, of course, thinking of Seyrig's performance and wondering how many different kinds of blankness are there in the movie. Are there different forms of her blankness, and do they mean different things? I mean, the answer is yes. There's the blankness where she's just thinking about the veal cutlets. That's the good blankness. Totally focused on her task, with no room for thoughts and no room for daydreams, because Seyrig kept talking in the documentary, or I mean, at least once she said, oh, she must be daydreaming. She's daydreaming.
No way, you'd be daydreaming about the Holocaust.
And maybe daydreaming means something to Seyrig, because we've talked about that quality that she has where she's just, like in La Musica, the first time we see her, she's just walking down the street and she looks like she's having a daydream. She looks like there's something going on there. She's not fully present. She's not fully aware of her surroundings. She's somewhere else. So she's absent, but where she is that she's not with the veal cutlets. She's off in her daydreams. She's got a soap opera happening in her head. So there's the veal cutlet blankness. Then there's all of the blanknesses from day 3 where the whole schedule's thrown off and she has all of this downtime. And Akerman said that's when she starts to worry.
Really unnerving.
But I'm talking about when she sits down, all the time she sits down and gets up again. And that's where, my grandmother comes in, right?
Yeah.
Sit down, grandma. You gotta tell her 5 times and she sits down, 3 seconds, she's up again. I saw some description online, an official description like Criterion or MoMA or something, talking about, maybe it was Senses of Cinema. Anyway, someone mentioned her loving, how unusual it is to see a movie representing a woman lovingly dusting the ornaments in her china cabinet. I'm like, lovingly? What are you talking about? She's about to go apocalyptic when she's so at loose ends that she actually opens up the china cabinet and takes these things out and just starts randomly dusting them.
Yeah, no, that's not part of the healthy ritual. And it's amazing that the movie allows you to observe and register these distinctions between the parts of the ritual that are constructive and helpful and the parts that are really just evidence of a person about to run amok.
Right, because it's a continuum. And I think that part does have insight into, what these rituals meant for any housewife. Or not just a housewife, but any woman who found herself doing housekeeping, right? Because, like I said, lots of these women were working, even in my grandmother's generation. The feminine gender role, right? What these rituals meant for these women and how it was a continuum, from something that was useful in fending off anxiety and something that was an out-of-control expression of anxiety. Like, for example, this time I noticed on the viewing when she makes the veal cutlets, that goes well, that goes right. But when she makes the meatloaf, that goes on way too long. She's lost it. She's lost control. It is compulsive at that point, right? To just keep molding the meatloaf. Meatloaf is day 3. Cutlets are... Wait, are cutlets day 1 or day 2?
I think the cutlets are day 2.
Yeah, because it's stew on day 1.
Yeah, everything went perfectly on day 1, and we don't even see the cooking on day 1. It's already prepared, right? It's simmering on the stove.
It wouldn't be as interesting as the meatloaf and the cutlets anyway.
Peeling the potatoes.
Well, there's the moment, did you notice there's a moment there where you can actually see her thinking?
That's right, and it's horrifying.
Yeah.
This is not what she wants out of the potatoes.
I don't know if you've ever watched that documentary.
Autour de Jeanne Dielman. Yeah, we did watch it together several years ago.
Well, it means a lot more to us, or meant a lot more to me this time. I'm sure it would you too if you watched it. And what it appears to document is, as I said initially, Seyrig is just continually telling Akerman off for not letting her inside this character's thoughts and not letting her bring anything to the role because everything Akerman wants is in her writing and in her direction. And she's just continually telling Akerman off. I find it so funny because I wonder what she was like with Marguerite Duras, who wants her to do even less in India Song. She's not even speaking in India Song.
I don't know. I feel like Marguerite Duras was a more forbidding presence, though.
Well, this is the thing. Obviously, this is Akerman's 25, and this is her first feature, and Seyrig is this huge star. But what it appears to document is that by the end of the movie, they are collaborating. And in fact, they make up the blocking of the murder scene together.
Yeah, well, they worked together several times after this, so clearly they developed a synergy.
Yeah, for sure. Akerman did accept contributions.
And I think it probably helps the movie that they were a little bit at odds, that Seyrig wanted to contribute some of her acteurism as well.
There's a very Sternberg quality to Akerman. She knows exactly what she wants the actors to do. It's not naturalistic. She knows exactly what she wants everything to look like, and she just wants them to do it. And fuck psychology.
Well, she is an amazing actress, Chantal Akerman.
Right.
I wish she had acted in more of her films.
Yeah, this is what I'm thinking of as a Sternbergism, when she's showing in the documentary Seyrig how to read the letter, right? And Seyrig is just like, what are you doing? Right?
Why would anyone do this?
No one would read a letter this way, never, and not to have any facial expressions or inflections. But it's the same way Akerman reads the real letters from her mother in News from Home, right? The exact same way.
Well, it has the cadence of a person reading aloud to themselves.
Do you think? Do you think that's the quality it's bringing? Why do you think she wants this quality?
I think it just highlights the hermetically sealed bubble that those two are in. I mean, ostensibly she's reading it to Sylvain, but really she's just reading aloud to herself, and that's what it sounds like. And when you're reading aloud to yourself, you don't worry about a fully dramatic reading. I don't actually read aloud to myself anyway, but that's what it would sound like. The inner voice just flatly reading each word, but you're not worrying about how it's going to sound to anyone else. She does not worry about how it's going to sound to Sylvain. That's the point.
And maybe, now I don't think this is the effect of the letters in News from Home, but for Jeanne, maybe there's also a keeping the words of the letter at an emotional distance.
Well, certainly.
Because she spends the next 2 days, as I said, absorbing this letter.
Think about what a disruption of her ritual that is going to be. If they're going to go off to Montreal for, 2-3 weeks? She can't make potatoes during the travel there, at the very least. How's she going to survive?
Well, that's your thoughts. Those are your Dave thoughts, because you get pretty rigid about your routines yourself.
Yes, I hate traveling. I mean, I do it because there are people I care about that I want to see elsewhere.
It just gets back to her telling that story. Her only real human moment in the whole movie, when she tells the story to this woman who gives no shits, when talking about the button, and how her sister gave this coat to Sylvain, and he's only just grown into it, and a whole little story with a smile, a nice soft Delphine Seyrig smile on her face as she tells this story about when her husband was alive, and she's allowing herself to feel and to miss her sister, maybe even miss her husband. This longing and this nostalgia is also part of her downfall.
The woman tells her, just replace all the buttons. It'll be like a brand new coat.
And you want her to, and she won't. But she won't because she wants to have something to do, right? So she's just going to carry this coat around. She knows no one's going to have the right button, and that's exactly why she has to keep looking for it.
Yeah.
So Akerman wrote this movie with Seyrig in mind, like Paul Thomas Anderson wrote Punch Drunk Love for Adam Sandler. So she said it was to make women's work, housework, visible, because if it was, the implication being that if it was some dumpy, dowdy looking actress doing this housework, you would just take it for granted and say, well, of course that's what a woman like that does. But if it's Delphine Seyrig, who is so beautiful and regal, then people are going to watch and say, why is she doing that, right?
There must be some other grander purpose to it.
Yeah, or maybe nobody should be doing it.
In this case, I think it's both.
And of course, something else that the casting of Seyrig does is put you in the position of a small child whose mother is, you might actually have a beautiful mother, but probably for a small child, whoever their mother is, they're beautiful, they're a goddess, right? The sexual glamour of the mother to the small child. And obviously cutting the husband out of this focuses on that mother-child relationship. Might as well be the prequel to Psycho or something here, Norman Bates and his mother, especially when he starts talking about how he wanted to kill his father once he found out about sex and realized his father was sticking his flaming sword inside his mother every night.
Yeah, it does make me worry about Sylvain's future. Comes home to find his mother covered in blood.
It is Psycho.
Someone should make Sylvain. Sylvain Dielman.
That kid would have been perfect. The actual actor who plays him would have been absolutely perfect.
He's really good.
Well, he directed a version of Hedda Gabler, apparently.
In 1978, so just a few years after playing a teenager in this movie.
He also directed something called Pierre.
Not the Melville Pierre, it seems.
No, but Pierre apparently murders a young woman named Jeanne, so I don't know, maybe that...
Disturbing.
It's the sequel we long for.
Maybe.
What seems clear is that Seyrig has such a weird career, as we've already commented, in that she is this method-trained, and not just New York method-trained, but all sorts of different kinds of training she received as an actor. So she would have been capable of psychological investigation of characters, of conventional dramatic acting, but her screen persona was established by last year at Marienbad, and in a way Jeanne Dielman is undercutting that, but in a way certainly, surely, something Akerman was thinking of when writing this film, something that she wanted from Seyrig was this removed, blank, enigmatic quality that was first achieved with last year at Marienbad.
I mean, it continued in things like Baiser Volé, La Musica as well. Yeah, sure, a lot of her movies make use of that persona trait.
Yeah, and I mean, what wildly different uses it was put to just in 1975 in Jeanne Dielman and India Song. And it must have been frustrating. Well, I mean, she talks about her frustrations in making this movie in that documentary. It must have been frustrating to Seyrig to not get to do the things she was capable of doing as an actor, but at the same time she is participating, and she knows she's participating in the making of these incredible, fascinating, unconventional movies.
Yeah, it was a choice. She wanted to work with the greatest auteurs of her time. She pretty much did.
Well, how would she know that Chantal Akerman was one? I guess reading the script.
Yeah, she recognized that this was going to be the greatest film of all time.
Any final thoughts before we move on to the sequel to Jeanne Dielman?
One thing that struck me this time, and honestly, I can't remember if it struck me before. Maybe I even said the same thing when we were doing Fear and Moviegoing for one of the retrospectives. Watching our protagonist sit there in the dark in her apartment, it really recalled to mind the ending of Applause, Mamoulian's film, with the mother sitting there.
In the chair?
Yeah.
Very different context, though.
Oh, absolutely different context. Somehow the same melancholy lingers over both.
Well, if there's any film that is more pessimistic than Jeanne Dielman, it would be Applause.
Could very well be Applause, yes. Let's hear what Letterboxd had to say about Golden Eighties. In a lively shopping center, proprietors and customers are bustling, including 3 women vying for a man's heart with song and dance.
That's it.
That feels quite inadequate as a description. The director, Chantal Akerman, cast list, Myriam Boyer, Delphine Seyrig, Fanny Cotenson, Leo, Pascal Salkin, Charles Denner, Jean-François Balmer, John Barry, Nicolas Tron, and I think we'll stop there, although there are quite a lot of people in this movie.
A cast of dozens.
A beauty shop chorus, and there's a mall chorus of roistering boys.
Do you think, Dave, that any young cinephiles these days go on Letterboxd and see the descriptions and think, oh, if only I could see that movie the way you did with Malton's video guide?
No, I think it lacks some of the evocative quality of Malton.
I don't see how Malton has an evocative quality, so maybe it's just generational.
Yeah, it could be. And also the fact that Malton was really, in some cases, the only way for someone of my limited means and experience to find out about these movies. You wouldn't necessarily go to a Letterboxd one-sentence descriptor in order to find out about a film these days. You could just ask your stupid AI friend to tell you all about the movie.
Yeah, but you'd better dig deeper or they're going to tell you all falsehoods.
Well, they might, yeah.
You had the library.
There were very limited resources.
Researching for this podcast has actually made me realize how difficult it is to find information about and or writing on some of these movies.
But if you've got newspapers.com or if you've got...
Yeah, I'm sure as a teenager you would have been subscribed to newspapers.com. I'm sure many teenagers today are in fact subscribed to newspapers.com.
I absolutely would have been subscribed to newspapers.com as a child.
You'd be using that instead of Letterboxd.
That would have been right at the top of my Christmas list.
We better undigress. I mean, at that rate, you can just ask your parents for a Criterion Channel subscription.
Yeah, probably would have done that too.
So I call this the sequel to Jeanne Dielman because, once again, Delphine Seyrig plays a Jeanne, in this case, a textually Jewish Jeanne Schwartz. I was ambivalent about including Golden Eighties in this spotlight because it didn't really resonate with me as much as some of the other films did when we saw the Akerman retrospective. But you really loved it, and it does have Delphine Seyrig in it, so actively wanted to give it another try. And I had an interesting experience with it this time, which long-time listeners of the pod will identify as a frequent interesting experience that I have with movie viewings, where I'm watching a movie feeling like I am absolutely not connecting with it emotionally at all, feeling as though I'm distanced from it and critical of it for one reason or another. Maybe I think it's too obvious a melodrama. Maybe I think it's a failed avant-garde experiment, but I feel the whole way through as though I'm not emotionally connecting to it, and then when the emotional climax of the film comes, suddenly I find myself sobbing, and that happened in this case. I don't know if you noticed me next to you there, Dave. The tears were just pouring down my face. It's a wonderful lifestyle.
Yes, I did. Gratified to see it because I think this is a really impressive film and it sounds like you're coming around on it.
And the moment responsible for that was Delphine Seyrig's song right after the third act, because this tiny movie, only 96 minutes long, nevertheless has 3 acts, like Jeanne Dielman. In the third act, Mado, in her future Miss Havisham wedding gown, discovers her betrayal. Sort of like the beginning of The Wedding Singer.
Yeah, they do have some things in common, The Wedding Singer and Golden Eighties.
Discovers her betrayal, and then to console her, Delphine Seyrig sings this wistful, melancholy song about how all of the loves we've ever had, even if they don't work out, they're never lost. Somewhere they still exist, in some Neoplatonic way, and create the battery of goodness in the world, which is what we all need, because otherwise another great horror is going to come, and it's going to be worse even than the first one, by which she means the Holocaust. This time, everything, all goodness, all life will be wiped out.
It's a pretty astonishing moment in a film that teases us with thinking it's going to be one of these, everything comes out all right in the end in a very conventional way. The young boys and young girls all get together, everyone gets together, the older generation too. They all finally have the reunion with their great love that they needed, and in fact, none of that happens, but then it pulls this out of the mix and tells you love is even more important than you thought it was when you were thinking it was just going to be a paint-by-numbers romantic comedy with some songs. And that feels really on brand for Chantal Akerman, because my sense of her, after watching so many of her films and reading a bit about her, although I do intend to read a lot more, and listening to her in interviews and watching her in documentaries, I mean, she does seem to have been, an unabashed optimist in a lot of senses, but also fighting this never-ending battle against like a horrifying depression that was partly something that she was dealing with personally, but also very firmly grounded in the genuine horrors of the world and of the 20th century. And to bring all of that into a riotous neon musical strikes me as inspired.
But there's no sense of the silliness or the technicolor riotousness of what's preceded in the movie. There's no sense of that being in any kind of ironic contrast to what happens.
Well, no, because the film is saying all of these hopes and dreams that people are investing in traditional romantic love stories are misguided, and it's showing these people to be very foolish. But at the same time, as Delphine Seyrig tells us, that very foolishness is in a direct and true relationship with all of the positive forces in the universe. We're not going to get what we want from those things, but what we might get instead is survival as a species.
Yeah, and I really feel the full force of that. I mean, that's where the sobbing was coming from. Not so different from watching the ending of Sancho the Bailiff, one of our mutual favorite movies on this podcast, because I really feel the full force. I know, and it's also the way I've been feeling about the world myself, even more. The Akerman retrospective was just before COVID and just before Sanders' final defeat in the primaries, Bernie Sanders, and more I have been feeling like Chantal Akerman toward the world, feeling like it's quite hopeless. And so I think I felt at this moment of Seyrig's wistful singing, I think I really felt a mourning for the world, and I think that is what she's asking for. So this movie, unfortunately, for both me and Akerman and everybody else, really connected with me on that level.
Yeah, well, I think that's what she intends, even though it's got this veneer of goofiness.
Yeah, and of course, she's been making nihilistic movies combined with goofiness since the beginning of her career.
There are some continuities that are easy to see here with Saute ma ville and with Je tue il elle.
I shouldn't say nihilistic, though, because it's not nihilistic to value the world this much, but despair over the way it's going.
No, nihilism's not the right word. Despairing, definitely.
Sure.
But you can't really despair unless you are animated by hopes and love. The reason you're despairing is because you're worried it's not going to be enough.
Yeah, or you're worried that all of these wonderful, valuable things that the world has to offer are simply going to cease to exist. I also just find the ending bold and remarkable from the standpoint of comedic structure. From the beginning, we're being set up to think of this as a romantic comedy. And it was interesting seeing this after so recently watching The Wedding Singer for our Valentine's episode, because that was a 80s nostalgia, quasi-musical romantic comedy made toward the end of the 90s. And this is a nostalgic 1980s musical comedy made in the 80s, which shouldn't be possible.
In the heart of the 80s, 1986. It's consciously designed to be an artifact of its era.
But I can't recall ever seeing another romantic comedy that ends not on the note of the united couple, but with the focus on the person who's been rejected.
We talked about this a little off mic. I can think of quite a few Woody Allen movies. They tend to end with the characters often played by Woody himself.
But not while someone else gets together.
Sure, they do.
But no, but this is different because, often in a romantic comedy there are several choices, and we're following a couple or a few couples, and there is somebody or a few somebodies who get rejected at the end, but this completely excludes us seeing a romantic couple joining together at all in favor of watching the devastation of the rejected person.
I think Crimes and Misdemeanors offers something akin to that, although it's got all kinds of other things going on too.
Yeah, maybe, but is Alan's character as devastated?
He seems pretty devastated. Maybe the only reason that's not registering with
is because he's not wearing a wedding gown?
Well, he's wearing a suit because he's at a wedding. I mean, he's sitting there next to Martin Landau, who has his own storyline talking about how he no longer regrets killing people. So maybe that's why it doesn't register. But, Woody's relationship with Mia in that movie just fizzles out and she marries Alan Alda.
Well, I'm not the person to comment on this. Somebody might want to look at some idea of Jewish comedy that can include everybody from Woody Allen to Chantal Akerman to Elaine May to maybe even Adam Sandler and Jerry Lewis, if we want to cast the net broadly.
Maybe.
I still feel like this movie, part of it is that very deliberate 3-act structure. I still feel like this movie is more self-consciously, in a Preston Sturges way, self-consciously employing, or maybe not self-consciously, maybe unconsciously on the writer-director's part, but self-consciously at some level in which plots are archetypes. The structure of comedy just seems more laid bare in this movie to me than it does in Crimes and Misdemeanors anyway. Very much like Jeanne Dielman, which tells us every time there's a new day. And that 3-act structure corresponds to 3 days, which is not the case in Golden Eighties. I don't know, you just have to, as a playwright, you kind of just have to know the feeling of when a new act starts.
Okay, but for you, what's the structure of a 3-act comedy?
Whether it's a 2-act or a 3-act stage play, each act functions independently. There's a certain amount of action that takes place within it, and then it reaches its own climax, and then things start over again when you reach the new act, but then it's also cumulative in its effect, right? And so the final act's climax, that is also cumulative, is Maddo's discovery of her betrayal.
And the way that brings her closer together with Delphine Seyrig.
And doesn't the second act finish
with Monsieur Jean going mental?
Yeah, exactly, right? And then time passes, and that's another factor often in the act structure, right? Time has passed, and now we're seeing where everybody is at again at the beginning of the next act. But another thing that makes this feel very much like a stage play, or tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm only thinking of it now, is that each act takes place in real time, doesn't it? I mean, certainly the final act does.
It feels like it does, anyway.
Yeah, well, everybody's just standing around in the stage set of the mall, the strip mall.
And they break out into song.
Well, it's not a strip mall. I don't know what you call those underground malls.
Galerie is what they call it.
Yeah, I mean, they're all over the place. We even had one in Winnipeg when I was growing up. They're all over the place in medium to large cities.
Got a lot of characters in this film. We actually start with Sylvie, who works at the coffee shop, right? She seems like she might be our main focus.
Well, she's telling us about one aspect of love.
Right, this long-distance romance she's having with a guy in Canada.
Yeah, this is another, feels like, callback to Jeanne Dielman, Letters from Canada.
And this guy's not having very much fun, though, in Canada. He's breaking his back working at a dam, hydroelectric dam. He may just come back empty-handed, basically, although he went there to make his fortune. By the end of the movie, she doesn't seem to care that much whether he does or not.
No, that felt like a nod to Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
Could be,
It's
yeah.
another form of anti-romance. The idea that, however grand and lyrical your love may be, time and distance, it can still fade.
So much of this film is a dramatization of interactions between characters who aren't in love with each other, but they understand each other because of the romantic tribulations that they're going through, right? Like we're introduced to Sylvie, who tells her story basically to Eli, John Barry, and he's going around telling his story to everyone about this great love that briefly came into his life at the end of World War II, and he nursed this woman back to health, and then he lost her. She's going to turn out to be Delphine Seyrig. We've got Mado and Pascal. They're like doubles of each other. They're both in love with Robert.
Yeah, I don't even know what Pascal is doing there. Toward the end of the movie, I started thinking wild thoughts. Like, I was like, do I remember the plot of this? Is Pascal going to get killed somehow or something? But no, nothing happens with Pascal.
She's just there to demonstrate that superfluity of romantic longing that characterizes the entire film, and the irrelevance of whether any of that feeling manages to lap up on the shores of an actual other person, right? Pascal just keeps saying, love is not for me. Why?
Well, we do know, of course, but this is reading through an auteur lens, we do know that Akerman has portrayed avatars of herself for whom love doesn't seem to be, and relationships don't seem to be very easy prospects.
Right. I think she probably is as close to the Akerman avatar as you're going to get in this movie.
Yeah, because this movie does it even hint anywhere at the possibility of queer desire? I don't think so.
Well, except in the fact that the all-female and all-male choruses are kind of singing to each other all the time. But I guess that's just what choruses do.
I mean, I guess technically, in the way the term queer is used now, we could call Pascal queer because she doesn't have any, well, she's in love with a man, but she doesn't have any strongly defined sexual identity of any kind, but she for some reason thinks that love is not for her, and that queers her, right?
Yeah, she's got a strange relationship to love, certainly.
Yeah, let's put it that way.
And she looks a fair bit like Mado.
Yeah.
And they're both crushing on Robert.
I don't even know why he picks Mado instead of the woman he'd already had a relationship with.
Robert's ways are hard to gauge. Also very hard to understand why any of them are interested in Robert, but that's part of the fun of this movie too.
Oh yeah, he's a love object void, that's for sure.
He doesn't seem to be particularly magnetic.
No.
I mean, I got the sense that he was a cipher. I guess his scenes with Lily have the most oomph to them. I'm not sure what he's doing there or if it's all coming from Lily. She was great.
Yeah, the oomph is definitely coming from Lily, starting from when she bites him and draws blood.
Mors-moi. And then she does. That is shocking. Yeah, and he's sitting there at the cafe with a bleeding lip afterwards. That's a serious love bite. Even Robert's mother dislikes him, and that comes out quite a bit at the end. She talks about how he's a complete moron. She appreciates Mado a lot more than she ever liked her own offspring. That recalled to mind some of the early phases of the Antoine Doinel series, where Doinel kept getting adopted by his girlfriend's family. But don't you think that is the key to this movie? Every single scene is structured around people telling other people that they're not in love with about the people that they are in love with.
Although a lot of people seem to want to confide in Jeanne, particularly. And she has to make a very pragmatic, realpolitik decision toward the end about whether to bust up this relationship with Mado, right? She acts on behalf of love. She states her reasoning out loud in so many words. She says, my stupid son will fuck up Mado's life more than he could Lily's, because, Lily is tougher.
Yeah, and Lily is likely to get tired of him before she even notices what an idiot he is.
So Delphine Seyrig herself, despite being this very sympathetic maternal character in the movie and romantic character in the movie, is the one who, takes if we're talking about Greek tragic parallels, takes a knife and sticks it in Iphigenia. But another way of coming at, this ending's emotional effect, and maybe this will help us start talking more about Delphine Seyrig's storyline. We've been focused on Mado. The way the younger generation of the 80s and this very early neoliberal materialistic Reagan 80s, set in a failing shopping mall,
yeah,
is brought together with the Holocaust past of Eli and Jeanne, right? The movie, despite satirizing capitalist believers, mainly Jeanne's husband, I guess he's just called Monsieur Schwartz. He doesn't get a first name.
No, I don't think we ever do hear his first name.
Monsieur Schwartz and his son, he's grooming to become a duplicate of him, and seems to be succeeding toward the end.
The store subdivides, takes over the lot next door, which had been occupied by the salon, and the son's in charge of that extension outlet.
He makes a really hilarious, robotic, pro-capitalist Alex P. Keaton speech.
Very consciously, I'm sure, on the script's part anyway, the language of fascism, expand or die.
Sounds like a little Nazi, for sure. But despite that satire, I think the movie makes clear that this belief in capitalism and belief in the petite bourgeoisie, the world of the shop around the corner, is the attempt of the Schwartzes to build a hopeful life for themselves that completely leaves that horror behind. A life that completely denies the possibility of that horror.
Their love for the store and for that dream of building a respectable life for themselves, that also is part of the love that is the bulwark against hell. One of the things I listened to before we started recording was on France Culture, the amazing app. You can listen to everything on there for free without ads. You do have to be able to listen to French though. But they had an 11-part series on Chantal Akerman where they gathered together some new material and a lot of older interviews. One of them was a 1-hour episode of a show called Microfilm from 1986, where Akerman spent the whole time talking about Golden Eighties, and a lot came out about this world of petit commerçant, petit bourgeois. She's like, no, I'm not making fun of these people. This is what I come from. These are my family. I love them.
Yeah, and so this petit bourgeois world is like the rituals in Jeanne Dielman. It is the solid reality that is going to protect you against the horror of the void, or the void of the horror, whichever way you want to look at it.
Well, there's so many continuities with Jeanne Dielman.
So that, I guess, is the key to understanding why Seyrig's character makes the choice, despite herself and her husband really never getting a moment together, where we understand the romance of work that she's talking about. Nevertheless, this is where this idea that a romance that includes work, or a work that includes romance, is better than pure feeling.
Right, because what John Barry is offering, Eli, is go off on a world tour just devoted entirely to love because they'd been deprived of it for so long, at least from his perspective, right? They had this brief time together in 1945. He was a GI in Europe. She was half dead. The movie goes to great length to explain to us why the moment never came for the powerful confession of love. But obviously, the experience marked both of them, and we are meant to think that in a different movie, this would be a perfect love match, and she would throw aside this dull, routinized life that she has with a husband that does nothing to inspire feelings of adoration that we can see, and a son that seems like a bit of a waste.
This is a measure of how philosophically specific this movie is, how it is expressing a very specific philosophy of its author. The fact that Seyrig doesn't, when weighing her marriage against this passion, she doesn't appeal to the child they've raised together. She appeals to the store that they've created and that they continue to work in.
Yeah, well, she's already made it plain how she feels about the child. And the other thing, of course, is that it is important that Barry shows up. She gets to revisit this love and know for certain how strong it was. Her song tells us. Part of the reason, I'm sure, that it struck you as forcefully as it did is because even though she's not going to go on a world tour of love with John Barry, those feelings are not lost. The fact that she had that option is not lost.
The idea is not just how untrustworthy feeling is, the fact that it can die, as everyone thinks it will between Lily and Robert, and as it may do for Sylvie.
And her Canadian boyfriend.
It's not just the fact that it's untrustworthy and could fade, it's the fact that the way of pure feeling is where potential madness lies.
Well, yeah, Monsieur Jean shows us that, right? He comes right to the edge of a murderous rampage.
Yeah, but then he pulls back and returns and orders orange juice for his kids.
He's all fine again by the third act, but he nearly kills Lily, and he destroys the entire salon.
That seems like your thesis about Jeanne Dielman, about how if the scissors hadn't been there, she would have been fine.
Exactly. Time heals all. That reservoir of love can heal all.
But Akerman does, for all her satire, see the vision of what this petite bourgeois business shop owning, the vision of transcendence within it, in a way that makes me think, when I'm trying to think over this movie's counterintuitive idea of love, its anti-romance idea of love, makes me think of our podcast, for example. And our podcast is also a kind of ritual. It is a way for us in our busy lives. We come together and do it every single week without fail, which also ensures that we have a deep conversation about things that we value every week, without which, who knows if our relationship would have survived this long and flourished.
I like to think we would have found a way.
But this is our way.
This is definitely our way. It's a very characteristic way. I'm glad we did this instead of opening a leather goods store.
We aren't trying to expand or die, though. And that's the other thing, because although she can see the vision behind the materialism, she also knows, clear-eyed in 1986, that this is going to fail, that it is failing, that capitalism is completely failing. This is not a person who was a Marxist or anything. But in 2011, in a famous and very long interview with Akerman that people could check out called the Pajama Game interview, she's using the term neoliberalism, and she is talking about systematic destruction of social democracy, the destruction of this very dream that these people have, that we could just have a decent, comfortable life that is free of horror.
Yeah, well, it was a very short-lived dream. It existed for some people in Europe and North America in the 20-30 years, give or take, after the end of World War II. Throughout the world, social democratic programs are dwindling away as the Golden Eighties were in progress.
This little dream that contains a big dream is what was going to compensate people for
what they went through.
For the traumas of World War II, yeah.
I think she does a great job, even with Monsieur Schwartz. She doesn't give him a first name, but that scene at the end, after he's achieved achieved his long-standing goal of annexing the salon and diversifying their goods, and nobody's coming, and he's just standing there dejectedly saying, people don't even come in to window shop. Like, he just seems so heartbroken, and he's so enamored of the idea of shopping and what it can do for a society and for him.
And he says twice, women will always buy dresses. They can't just go around naked, can they? It's absolutely hilarious. Actually, that is the movie's one moment of queer identity on screen, other than the ambiguity of whatever is going on with Pascal, is that daughter who comes in, who I guess we would now call her genderqueer. Maybe she's a lesbian, we don't know. She absolutely does not. She hates femininity, and she gets in a huge fight with her mother. In fact, she destroys the dress that her mother wants her to wear now that she's dating, her mother says.
Yeah, it's a pretty funny scene.
So, I mean, but what the scene is saying is that, maybe women won't always want to wear. But I feel heartbroken on his behalf. We want these things to work out. We want the bourgeois dream to succeed. Don't you? Don't you even now? Don't you want our jobs to work out? Don't you want us to have a secure existence free from horror? You want these things to work. I walk through the mall now. I walk through Toronto Eaton Centre and I go, I don't know, a beautiful mall. Probably one of the most beautiful malls in Canada. I don't know how these stores are surviving, and it's not as busy as malls used to be, but somehow they are, and it's this gorgeous temple to the dream of social democratic capitalism working, and it still fills me with a combination of joy and anxiety.
And there are ceilings full of Michael Snow sculptures.
Yeah, I'm sure Akerman would have loved that mall.
Maybe.
Do we want to talk specifically about Delphine Seyrig in this movie?
Yeah, of course we do.
So here she is able to be a character who in very sharp contrast to Jeanne Dielman, she's able to draw on the side of herself that she uses in Baxter v. Baxter, right? A very
nurturing,
golden, warm, radiant character, right? That seems to, again, it's not so much acting, although arguably she does an amazing acting job in this movie. But this is another quality that she can just bring to the screen, right? This peaceful, radiant presence that registers as maternal. But maternal not to her son.
No, to the mall.
To the mall. Maternal to the mall.
And to John Barry, I guess, a little bit. Their dynamic is really interesting because she does have to convince us that this love that he's going on and on about was real for her too, in her own way. But she has to convey some sense of the reasoning that goes into her decision not to throw it all away and get her groove back. She does a wonderful job of taking us along on that roller coaster. But she never lets any of that pull her away from her concern for the new generation, represented by Mado especially.
Yeah, and cleaning up after her son's romantic misadventures. But yeah, she has this kind of detached empathy for all of these girls who come into her orbit thanks to Robert.
And the detached empathy extends to Eli as well, ultimately. Her philosophy that emerges in that song, part of what allows her to reject his offer. She knows, and the movie proves her right, that he's going to be fine. In fact, he clearly needed to meet her again in order to go deeper into a relationship.
Finally realizes this is over. They close the book on that chapter.
He'd been stalled because he never got a chance to tell her how he felt. Now he has, and those feelings are out there in the universe. She didn't react the way he had hoped she would, but the message was delivered. At that point, he was able to, first run off with Lily for a while, just randomly, because he was the person she bumped into as she tried to escape the murderous rampage of Monsieur Jean, and then that went nowhere, as you'd expect, and then he's married this other woman. We don't know much about her or anything about her. He seems very content. And that definitely seemed like a scene from a Woody Allen movie where two couples run into each other at the end of the film and complicated relationship diagonally between the couples.
But I was also thinking again of Umbrellas of Cherbourg and how it's kind of the opposite. Those couples have betrayed the innocent romantic feeling between them as youngsters by joining the bourgeoisie. Here it's the bourgeoisie that's failing.
All of it's contained in that song by Seyrig. There's no betrayal betrayal in this movie. The ultimate tone of the film and the ultimate landing place for everyone is about as far away from bitterness as you can get.
There is a kind of cynicism, because we, as viewers of romantic comedies, may want to believe that Lily and Robert are well matched and maybe their relationship will last. And, the chorus of commentary at the very end of the movie is predicting that, that there's no way.
No, there isn't. Again, I think that's where this differs from almost any other romantic comedy or cynical comedy I can think of, because it brings those two things together. It fuses them in a uniquely Akermanian way.
Right, and then Maddow says, oh, he's going to get over her right away. Well, maybe he'll still marry me.
Yeah.
Seyrig, in her wisdom, says, you're going to be over him before that even happens.
Yeah.
So all of these feelings, including the feelings of Sylvie, even after they die, this is the movie's realistic but arguably deep perspective on love, right? The feelings may die. They may die very quickly, but that doesn't mean... And you're not necessarily going to die of them, but that doesn't mean that they weren't perfectly real.
None of it is a mirage.
When you're having the feelings for however briefly it lasts and how unworthy the object is, you are still plugged into this universal battery of love.
That's right. And to go back to microfilm, that's the sense I got from Akerman, that she did think of it as a joyous ending.
Oh my god.
The interviewer was saying, well, but why couldn't they have gone off together? Why can't Delphine Seyrig and John Barry be happy together? And she's like, well, that's not the point of the movie. Their love doesn't have to be validated that way.
And can you think, it's hard to imagine, which makes, again, this movie and Vera Baxter very connected for me as Delphine Seyrig movies. This quality of radiant warmth that she brings to this movie is what pulls the ending off, right? I mean, I guess you could find another actor who could trigger the tears just as well, but she certainly does.
We've already talked about how by the end of the making of Jeanne Dielman, Akerman and Seyrig were certainly functioning hand in glove. That continues here in a completely different genre, but it's obvious that Akerman had studied this actress and knew what she could do for the films that she wanted to make as she evolved and tried new things. And there can't possibly have been a better casting choice than Delphine Seyrig for this part.
Well, even if you exclude the fact that Akerman was using her as a sort of avatar for her own mother and her feelings about her mother and her family and her family's history, which both of these movies are steeped in.
It's a shame that people didn't understand it at the time, and I don't know if they understand it any better now.
Well, it is a movie that has been reappraised by critics, for sure. Quite a lot of writing on it, like the MoMA retrospective on Akerman talking about it. Quite a lot of writing is recognizing it as a masterpiece now, so that's good. Probably it's never going to be chosen as the greatest movie of all time, unfortunately, and therefore won't become an internet talking point. It's not going to be as seen as Jeanne Dielman, even though it's probably a much easier watch.
I wonder what's going on with the critical appraisal of Un Divan à New York. That's another one I absolutely loved.
Yeah, I want to revisit that one now too, because they seem to be related in that they're Akerman's efforts to make genre movies. The one I really want to see again is...
Demain on déménage?
No, Les Rendez-vous d'Anna.
Oh, of course. Well, that is on the schedule.
Yeah, which is not a genre movie, but I mean, they're all good, obviously. It was a life-changing event, seeing that retrospective.
It was. All right, well, we'll have to bid adieu to Delphine Seyrig for now, but rest assured, she will recur in our journey. Next week on the podcast, it's the Hollywood Studios Year by Year. Universal 1933 will be discussing The Invisible Man and Counselor at Law. You will not want to miss that.